Wherefore, Series 3, Episode 29. Sabrina is on a bench in the middle of Stroud, pretending to read a book. On the other side of the street are a few people at a table handing out leaflets full of lies and misinformation about vaccines. They do this regularly, and like many people in Stroud, Sabrina is furious about their presence. She is here specifically to make life difficult for them. One of the hardest things to achieve with magic is to make something or someone do what they do not want to do. Sabrina wants the anti-vaxxers to not be out here trying to confuse people. Making them go home hasn't worked, and trying to silence them is technically difficult and rather hard work. However, finding ways to annoy them seems like a good wizarding workout, and Sabrina has zero qualms about the ethical aspect of using anti-vaxxers in this way. One of Sabrina's school friends has long COVID and has been suffering for months. She has a cousin whose existing health problems mean he can't have the vaccine. She takes the pandemic seriously and has spent a lot of time trying to make sense of the science. A person can be reluctant to trust their government and can be resistant to authority and not fall into the kinds of weird thinking that the conspiracy theorists are going for. Anti-vaxxers inspire in her a kind of rage that she is determined to use productively, and so here she is, pretending to read and trying to mess them up. Her strategy is fairly simple. She's trying to swap one word for another, creating a little reality bubble around them in which the word they want to use disappears out of existence and another word takes its place. This is quite a sophisticated thing to attempt. She's previously explored trying to change things inside their heads, but this is both remarkably difficult and highly distasteful. Changing how a person thinks requires a level of engagement that is invasive. Experimenting on psychopaths is one thing, getting into their heads quite another. Illusions depend on creating a space where, for a while, the usual rules do not quite apply. What is there is not what appears to be there. The easiest way to create an illusion is not by making a magical change to what's there, but by making people think differently about what they can see. Sabrina has considered the mechanics of creating an illusion and come up with an interesting innovation. In the vicinity of the table, she has created a reality bubble, and she can maintain it from where she is sitting, although it takes a lot of concentration. Inside this little bubble, the word for vaccine does not exist. For anyone inside the bubble, trying to say vaccine is difficult through to impossible. The word isn't there. This causes the anti-vaxxers considerable inconvenience, as it's hard to be anti-something you can't articulate. They swap in other words, of course, obliged to talk about jabs, medical interventions, and to make arm-stabbing gestures. They know there's a word for who they are and what they're protesting, and every time they can't find it, their facial expressions are highly entertaining. Having done this a few times now, Sabrina is adept at setting up her little reality bubble in which vaccination does not exist. She is now on to phase 2. This is slightly tricky, and yesterday's version didn't quite work, but she learns by experimenting. Yesterday, she tried for the first time to replace the word vaccine with another word. The aim is to make them seem even more ridiculous than they already are. This is much harder than a visual illusion, she's finding. As long as you don't stretch credulity too far, you can persuade people that they are seeing one thing and not another. It is easier to hide outrageous things with illusions than create them. People are often happy to be persuaded that the mammoth is really a puppet, and far less willing to believe that the puppet is really a living mammoth. Taking a word and replacing it with another word is much less persuasive. Yesterday, she removed the word vaccine from her little reality bubble and tried to replace it with the word unicorn. It was worth it for the single time one of the people at the table asked a passing member of the public whether they were aware of the dangers of unicorns. Unfortunately, she laughed so hard at this that her concentration went entirely and the reality bubble itself broke. Today she is exploring several new strategies at once. Clearly, she cannot afford to swap vaccines for something that will make her laugh if the effort works and the protesters say her word instead. Secondly, she has realised that there might be some mileage in being plausible after all. It's not just the people in the reality bubble she needs to persuade. The whole thing will work better if reality in general finds her illusion persuasive. She has given this considerable thought. There is an older lady making her way slowly up the street. Sabrina knows from prior experience that the anti-vaxxers are going after people who are less likely to be able to check facts online. She takes a deep breath and bears down as hard as she can with her magic. "Have you got a moment?" calls out one of the men at the table. The woman pauses and turns to look his way. "Can I talk to you for a moment about the dangers of Russian propaganda?" he asks. He looks a bit confused by what he's just said, but carries on anyway. "Have this leaflet about Russian propaganda. It explains everything you need to know." The woman does not accept the leaflet and hurries away. The man at the table turns to his co-conspiracist. "I know I just said Russian propaganda, but I feel like Russian propaganda might not be the right thing to say." The second man nods, frowning. "What else do we call it but Russian propaganda?" he asks. "It is what it is." They both look uneasy. The quiet wizard sits down next to Sabrina. She continues to pretend to read her book. "That was beautiful," he said. "You've entirely made my day." She smiles at this and says nothing.